The snow fell in relentless sheets over Moscow, a city draped in the iron shroud of the Cold War. It was December 1962, and the world teetered on the edge of annihilation. The Cuban Missile Crisis had only just receded, leaving behind a residue of paranoia and mistrust. In the shadow of the Kremlin, where the red stars burned against the gray sky, secrets were currency, and betrayal was the only certainty. Jack Tanner, codename Hawk, moved through the crowded streets of the Arbat district, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. He was 32, lean and hard, with eyes like chipped flint and a jawline that suggested both resolve and recklessness. His dark overcoat blended with the throng of Muscovites, but his mind was a coiled spring, alert to every face, every glance. Tanner was CIA, one of Langley's best, sent to Moscow to retrieve a defector who claimed to possess the Soviet Union's nuclear contingency plans, codename Operation Zephyr. The defector, a mid-level GRU officer named Viktor Sokolov, had vanished 2 days ago, leaving only a cryptic message: "Meet the Nightingale at the Red Veil." The Red Veil was a cabaret in a crumbling pre-revolutionary building, a den of smoke and intrigue, where Soviet elites mingled with foreign diplomats under the watchful eyes of the KGB. Tanner's contact, the mysterious Nightingale, was his only lead. He had no name, no face, only a warning from his handler: trust no one, especially her. Inside the Red Veil, the air was thick with the scent of vodka, perfume, and desperation. A jazz band played a mournful rendition of Autumn Leaves, and the dim lights cast long shadows across the room. Tanner scanned the crowd: diplomats in tailored suits, Soviet officers in crisp uniforms, and women in glittering dresses who moved with the grace of predators. He took a seat at the bar, ordering a stoloshnaya neat, his eyes never still. She appeared like a phantom, slipped onto the stool beside him. Her hair was raven black, cascading in waves over a crimson dress that clung to her like a second skin. Her eyes, green as Siberian jade, held a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. She was young, perhaps 25, with a face that could have graced the Bolshoi stage. But there was steel beneath the beauty, a sharpness that set Tanner's instinct on edge. "You're late," she said, her English flawless, but laced with a Russian accent that rolled like velvet. She lit a cigarette, the flame illuminating her features for a moment before plunging them back into shadow. "You're the Nightingale?" Tanner asked, his voice low, his hand resting near the concealed beretta under his coat. "Call me Natasha," she said, exhaling a plume of smoke. "And you're the American who thinks he can outwit the KGB in their own backyard." Tanner's jaw tightened. "Where's Sokolov?" "Dead," she said flatly. "Shot in an alley near Gorky Park last night. The KGB got to him first." The words hit Tanner like a gut punch, but he kept his face impassive. "Then why am I here?" "Because I have what you want," Natasha said, leaning closer. Her perfume was intoxicating, a blend of jasmine and danger. "Sokolov gave me the Zephyr dossier before he died, but it comes with a price." Tanner's mind raced. The dossier was his mission, his ticket out of Moscow before the KGB closed the net. But trusting Natasha was like dancing on a razor's edge. "What's your price?" "Get me out," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "To the west. I'm done with this cage of a country." He studied her, searching for the lie. Her eyes held his, unflinching, but there was a flicker of something, fear perhaps, or desperation. "Why should I believe you?" he asked. "You shouldn't," she replied, a faint smile curling her lips. "But you don't have a choice." The next 48 hours were a blur of shadow and steel. Natasha, Tanner learned, was Natasha Petrova, a translator for the GRU with access to high-level intelligence. She was also, by her own admission, a double agent, feeding information to a British MI6 operative, until he was compromised and executed. Sokolov had been her last hope, and now Tanner was her only way out. Their partnership was uneasy, built on mutual necessity rather than trust. Natasha provided the dossier's location, a safe house in the Takanka district, but warned the KGB was closing in. Tanner's training kicked in. He mapped escape routes, secured false papers, and rigged a dead drop for his CIA contact at the American embassy. But Moscow was a labyrinth of surveillance, and every step felt like a trap. The safe house was a dilapidated apartment above a butcher shop, its walls stained with damp and its windows boarded. Natasha led him to a loose floorboard where the dossier was hidden, a sheaf of documents detailing Soviet nuclear deployments in Eastern Europe. Tanner's heart pounded as he scanned the pages. This was it, the intelligence that could shift the balance of the Cold War. But as he tucked the dossier into his coat, the sound of boots echoed in the stairwell. KGB, Natasha hissed, her hand on a Makarov pistol she'd produced from nowhere. Tanner's mind snapped into focus. How many exits? 2. Back doors blocked. Windows are only shut. They moved as one, silent and swift. Tanner pried open the window, revealing a rusted fire escape slick with ice. But below, the alley was dark, but headlights flickered at its mouth. Natasha went first, her movement graceful despite the danger. Tanner followed, his Beretta drawn, his pulse a steady drumbeat. The fire escape groaned under their weight, and a shout rang out from the apartment. The KGB had breached the door. Tanner fired 2 shots through the window, buying seconds, then dropped to the alley. Natasha was already running, her crimson dress a beacon in the snow. He caught up, grabbing her arm as they ducked into a side street. They'll have checkpoints on every road out of the city, Natasha said, her breath ragged. We need to reach the embassy. Tanner shook his head. Too hot. We go to ground. Wait for my contact to arrange extraction. Her eyes flashed with frustration, but she nodded. They found refuge in a derelict warehouse near the Moscow River, its walls crumbling, but its shadows deep. Inside they crouched among the crates, the cold seeping into their bones. Tanner checked the dossier, ensuring it was intact, while Natasha kept watch at a broken window. Why do you do it? He asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Natasha's gaze was distant, fixed on the snow outside. This isn't the country. It's a prison. My father was a physicist, worked on the Tsar Bomba. He spoke out against it, and they sent him to the Gulag. My mother died of grief. I was 16. The GRE recruited me, said I could serve the motherland, but all I've seen is blood and lies. Tanner felt a pang of something. Sympathy, perhaps, or recognition. His own life was a series of missions, each one stripping away a piece of his soul. And the West? You think it's any different? No, she said, turning to face him. But at least I'll be free to choose my cage. Their eyes locked, and for a moment the world narrowed to the space between them. Tanner saw the fire in her, the defiance that mirrored his own, but he pushed the thought aside. She was a means to an end, nothing more. The extraction was set for dawn, a CIA operative waiting at a disused airstrip outside Moscow. But the KGB was relentless, their net tightening with every hour. Tanner and Natasha moved through the city like ghosts, dodging patrols and informants. By nightfall, they'd reached a safe house in Zomoskoretsky, a crumbling tenement with a hidden room behind a false wall. Inside they collapsed, exhaustion overtaking them. The room was small, lit by a single bulb, with a cot and a table strewn with maps. Tanner cleaned his Beretta, his movements mechanical, while Natasha studied the maps, plotting their final route. We might not make it, she said quietly, her voice stripped of its earlier bravado. We'll make it, Tanner said, more to convince himself than her. I've gotten out of worse." She laughed, a soft, bitter sound. "You're a terrible liar, Jack Tanner." He looked up, startled by the sound of his name on her lips. She was closer now, her face inches from his, her eyes searching his. The air between them crackled, charged with the weight of their shared peril, and the unspoken truths that had bound them over the past days. Her hand reached out, tentative at first, her fingers grazing his cheek, and the touch was a spark in the darkness, igniting something neither could deny. "Natasha," he began, his voice rough with restraint, but she shook her head, her eyes fierce and unguarded. "No words," she whispered, her breath warm against his lips. "Not tonight, not when we might not see the dawn." She kissed him, and the world dissolved into a maelstrom of heat and longing. It was a kiss born of desperation, fierce and unyielding, a collision of two souls who had danced too long on the edge of oblivion. Her lips were soft, yet demanding, tasting of vodka and defiance, and Tanner felt the walls he'd built around his heart crumble under the onslaught. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she pressed herself against him, her body a lithe, trembling force that matched his own hunger. The cot creaked as they sank into it, their movements a fevered dance of urgency and tenderness. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him deeper into the kiss, and he responded with a low growl, his hands roaming her back, tracing the curve of her spine through the fabric of her dress. The cold of the room vanished, replaced by a fire that burned in their shared breath, their shared need. Her hair spilled across his chest like a dark river, and he buried his face in it, inhaling the scent of jasmine and danger that was uniquely hers. Their union was a rebellion, a defiant stand against the machines of war that had shaped their lives. It was not about conquest, but communion, a fleeting sanctuary where they were no longer spies, no longer enemies, but simply Jack and Natasha, two souls clinging to the edge of life. Her whispers were soft, not of secrets but of dreams, a cottage by a lake, a world where they could walk hand in hand without fear, a life where their names were their own. Each word was a thread, weaving a fragile tapestry of hope that neither dared believe in fully, yet neither could resist. Tanner's hands cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had slipped from her eyes, and he kissed her again, slower this time, savoring the taste of her, the feel of her. Her breath hitched, a soft moan escaping her lips, and it sent a jolt through him, a reminder of how alive they were in this moment. She arched against him, her hands sliding under his shirt, her touch searing his skin, and he felt the world narrow to the rhythm of their heartbeats, synchronized in their shared defiance of fate. The bulb above flickered, casting their shadows in a dance across the peeling walls, and time seemed to pause, granting them this stolen eternity. Her eyes met his, green and luminous, and in them he saw not just desire, but a mirror of his own yearning, for freedom, for peace, for a life where love was not a luxury but a right. He held her tightly, his heart pounding against hers, knowing this was a moment they might never reclaim, a flame that burned too brightly to last. When the crescendo of their passion subsided, they lay entwined, their breaths mingling in the quiet. Her head rested on his chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his skin, and he felt the weight of unspoken promises settle over them. The silence was heavy, not with regret, but with the knowledge that dawn would bring either salvation or ruin. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, his lips lingering, and she sighed, a sound of contentment laced with sorrow. "We could run," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Find a place where no one knows us." He smiled, though it hurt. "We'd never stop running." "Then let's run together," she said, lifting her head to meet his gaze. "Until the world catches up." He didn't answer, but his arms tightened around her, a silent vow. The bulb flickered one last time, plunging the room into darkness, and Tanner held her close, willing the night to last forever. The airstrip was a desolate stretch of snow and gravel, the CIA plane a dark shape against the gray sky. Tanner and Natasha reached it just as first light broke, their breath visible in the freezing air. The operative, a grizzled man named Callahan, waved them forward, but the sound of engines roared in the distance. "KGB," Natasha said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Tanner handed her the dossier. "Get this to Callahan. I'll hold them off." "No," she said, grabbing his arm. "We go together." "There's no time," he snapped, shoving her toward the plane. "Go!" She hesitated, her eyes blazing, then ran for the plane. Tanner turned, his Beretta raised, as 3 KGB cars skidded into view. He fired, taking out a tire, then dove behind a stack of crates. Bullets tore through the air, splintering wood, but he returned fire, his training a cold, precise machine. The plane's engines roared to life, and Tanner risked a glance. Natasha was aboard, the dossier safe. Callahan signaled, and the plane began to move. Tanner fired one last shot, then sprinted for the plane, his legs burning. A bullet grazed his shoulder, but he ignored the pain, leaping for the open hatch. Natasha's hand caught his, pulling him inside as the plane lifted off. Bullets pinged against the fuselage, but they were airborne, climbing into the dawn. Tanner collapsed, blood seeping from his shoulder, and Natasha knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she pressed a cloth to the wound. "You're an idiot," she said, tears in her eyes. "But I'm your idiot," he replied, managing a weak grin. She laughed, a sound of relief and defiance, and kissed him again, softer this time, a promise of tomorrows they might yet steal. In London, weeks later, Tanner sat in a safe house, the dossier now in Langley's hands, its secrets reshaping the Cold War's chessboard. His shoulder was healing, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Natasha had been debriefed by MI6, her defection a closely guarded secret. She was in a flat across the city, starting a new life under a new name. He found her on a rainy evening, standing by a window overlooking the Thames. She wore a simple dress, her hair loose, and she turned as he entered, her smile both wary and warm. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Neither should you," he replied, crossing the room. "But here we are." They stood close, the rain a soft drumbeat outside. "What now, Jack Tanner?" she asked. He took her hand, his touch steady. "We figure it out. Together." And in that moment, with the world's shadows held at bay, they dared to believe in a future where love could outlast the game.